welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. So glad you could join us on a Thursday. We're pumped up. You know, my family's in town. I'm taking my dad to the UNLV football game on Saturday. Always fun to watch college football. I've always gone to UNLV football games, no matter what team they have, what record they have. Look, it's still college football, and those games are fun to watch. And by the way, it's the last year in Sam Boyd Stadium. So the guy we have with us on the line right now, friend of the show, personal friend. He's a great guy, does a fantastic show. It's called Straight Outta Vegas with Bernie Fratto, weekends on Fox Sports, and he knows his stuff, man. That's why we love having him on the show, Mr. Bernie Fratto himself. Bernie, thanks for coming on, my man. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. We may not have football weather here in Vegas, but we've got football, and I know you and I are both happy about that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I know myself and JD, we want to talk to you a little college football on the national spectrum, but before we do that, let's start local, Bernie, because you've lived in Vegas how long now?
Be 10 years in February.
Yeah, you know UNLV football inside and out. So we had Tony Sanchez on the show, and I asked him point blank, listen, Coach, if you don't make a bowl game this year, do you think it's fair that your job could be on the line? And I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said yes, and he said that should be where UNLV football should be at every year. So let me ask you that same question. If Tony Sanchez and the UNLV football program are not bowl eligible this year, do you think he needs to go?
Yes. He's been given his 5 years, and I'm glad they gave him the full 5 years. And in this man's college football, 6 wins get you into the pool. And we've observed other programs around the country that have been turned around relatively quickly. So, look, I was very much for the Tony Sanchez hire. I respect what he did at Gorman. But after 5 full years, if the Rebels can't advance to a bowl game, when you observe other teams in this conference in that same tenure have improved and gotten to bowl games, then it's probably time to go on. Plus, Brian, you're a pretty savvy guy. You know the dynamic. He was not hired by Desiree Reed-Francois. So he's not her guy, if you will. So that doesn't work in his favor either.
So let's talk, and by the way, I agree with you. So we talk about the Fertitta connection. Let's just call it for what it is. Some people feel like, and I'm one of them, that if the Fertittas were not a part of the program and they have a lot of money, they've donated a lot of money to the UNLV football program, that he might not have even been back this year. Would you agree with that?
Based on what I've heard and what's been bandied about around town, that appears to be an accurate statement to me.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the issue was do you give him his full tenure if he turns it around heading into the new stadium, you've got momentum, or at the same time, if they fail to, manage to reach expectations this year, which is a bowl game, then you cut it off before you head to the new stadium. But what you just stated, I've heard more than once around town.
And let me be very clear. I like Tony Sanchez. I have not always said that about coaches in this town. I like Tony Sanchez.
He's an honest guy.
I think he's a good guy. He's very, very gracious with his time with us. He's an easy guy to root for. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I want nothing more than him to have a great year. And by the way, I felt like last year when Armani Rogers went down, UNLV's quarterback, I feel like if Rogers was healthy, I actually do feel like they probably would have made a bowl game. Not a guarantee, but I think they probably would have had a better year, definitely would have had a better year, and I think they would have made a bowl game. But isn't it scary now, Bernie, that if Rogers does get hurt, and we hope that doesn't happen, but if Armani does get hurt, that could be the end of Tony Sanchez, and you're relying so much on your quarterback. But I think if Armani gets hurt, I think they're done.
Well, it would certainly be problematic if your QB1 goes down with his physical gifts. But I would say this, Brian, the world's a vexing enough place without hypotheticals, so we're all hoping he doesn't. But to your point, because there's such emphasis in your voice, you know the style he plays. One of the things about Armani Rogers that we've learned over the years is his default mechanism is to take off and run.
Right.
I don't particularly know that he makes his read progressions well. Bottom line is this. Injuries are a part of it, and Tony's going to have to get to a bowl game with or without him. And I think the more daunting aspect of this upcoming season, even though the Rebels do have 9 starters back on offense, is their schedule. And if you look at after the first 2 games, they've got to play the next 4 out of the next 5 on the road at Northwestern, at Wyoming, at Vanderbilt, at Fresno State. That's not easy duty. And sandwiched in between those games is a home date with Boise State. That's going to be the gauntlet they're going to have to navigate.
So I asked Tony, I said, hey, you've got a lot of wide receivers coming back with experience. Is the offense, despite the fact that Armani Rogers has not been a throwing quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but despite the fact that the offense has been a running offense, will the offense change this year and having the weapons back that they do? And he said that it will. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you give what the defense takes you based on the scheme. And the bottom line is I don't necessarily agree. I think they're going to be a run-first offense. The one thing the Rebels did well last year was run the ball well, and they're better than average up front. They got 4 offensive linemen back. But my concern is the other side of the ball. They only returned 4 people on defense. I understand 2 defensive backs were ineligible because of academics. And one of the things that's baffling to me, Tony's done a pretty good job of recruiting junior college players, which is not uncommon in today's game. But I'm understanding when camp broke, many of the guys he recruited aren't even starting. So I think they have to get on the field, and their offense will be dictated by how well their defense keeps them in the position to run the offense they'd like to run.
So when you look at week 1, Saturday, 7 p.m., I believe, is the start time. Southern Utah in town. Not exactly a D1 powerhouse is Southern Utah, although, Todd Simon, who coaches the basketball.
What is that spread? Do you know?
I don't know. I believe around
27.
24.
Last I saw was 27, guys.
I didn't even know.
Low.
I didn't even know it was on the board. But anyway, going back to Southern Utah, we just had Todd Simon, friend of the show, a friend of mine. He's doing a great job with the basketball program, but a totally different scenario with the football program. I think they only won a couple games last year, and they brought in Fisher's son to help on the defensive side of things. I was reading a little bit about the program. They claim that they're ready and they're locked and loaded. And the year before, they had a really good year, but last year was atrocious. Should this be any challenge at all for UNLV? And again, we remember what happened a couple years ago when they lost to Howard.
13.
Yeah, we remember a few years ago when the spread was 50. So you never know what could happen here. What do you know about this Southern Utah team? Should UNLV be concerned about anything?
Yeah, first I apologize. They lost to Howard in 2017, Cam Newton's brother. It was 2013, Bobby Hauck's 4th year when Southern Utah strolled into town and
killed
beat the Rebels, and they beat them. You're right, Brian. They beat their butt on the line of scrimmage, and that was a pretty good team. Put a couple of guys into the NFL, including Miles Killebrew, who's from Las Vegas, who's playing for the Detroit Lions. But to your question, this is an interesting game. You're right. Southern Utah was 1-10 last year, but in talking to their media people, we find out that they had 12 key injuries, which was devastating. And by week 8, they were down to a 4th-string freshman quarterback who couldn't run an RPO. So last season, you got to really throw out. They got all their players back. And from the Southern Utah standpoint, they look at this game as their Super Bowl. They are fired up. Here's how fired up they are. They know, it's pretty hot in Utah, too. And where they're at in Cedar City, gets to be about 90 degrees, but down in St. George, it gets close to 100. They've been practicing the last few days down in St. George. As a matter of fact, I understand they had a practice last Saturday night from 5 to 8 to simulate game-time heat, 3 hours.
Wow.
So they're fairly locked and loaded. They got a transfer in from Fresno State, a transfer in from Utah State. They're going to take this game seriously, or I think UNLV clearly has the advantage is up front in their offensive line. They should be able to run the ball against Southern Utah at will. Everybody did last year. If the Rebels can't run the ball early up front, we might be in for an interesting contest Saturday night.
So reading between the lines, you would take the points if you were Southern Utah.
It's a complete stay away from me.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch it regardless.
First of all, it's a fair question. But there's too many unknowns in this game, and I would tell anybody, and maybe we'll get to this. Money management is the reason most gamblers go down. You really got to protect your bankroll, and I look for value on the board. And when there's so many better games, it's a stay away for me. But to not sidestep the question, if you had a gun to my head and said you had to take one side or the other, yes, I would take the 4 touchdowns. In college football, it clearly comes down to motivation and who has it. And I can tell you, Southern Utah is going to be very motivated. I actually think they're going to be better than people think.
And for the record, right now, the game is not up. It's not on the board in any Las Vegas casinos. It will be probably in a day or two, but the consensus that came out was 24. I know you said 27, so who knows? I think by game time, it probably will be 27. But they put usually these types of weird games, Bernie, as you know, and this is what you guys do for a living, but Bernie, as you know, They usually don't put these weird games up until either late Friday night or very early Saturday morning, right, guys?
That's exactly right. The bottom line is when an FCS team plays an FBS team, a sports book will typically post a number the day of the game or maybe the night before, but certainly the day of. And I believe from memory, because I looked a couple weeks ago, probably one of the offshore books I saw as the send-off line. I do remember seeing 27. That leads me to believe early action has probably come in on Southern Utah.
So have you gotten a chance to watch any practices at all?
No, I haven't.
Okay, let's assume I haven't either. But who do you think, or who have you heard from friends or insiders in the program that is going to be kind of the breakout player to watch this year for UNLV?
Forgive me, I'm really not qualified to answer that question. And until I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to answer that question.
That's all right.
I think Brian, you brought up the point earlier. The bottom line is they're going to go as far as Armani Rogers takes them. And had he stayed healthy last year, they may very well have won 6-7 games. They won, I believe they were 4-8. So with him on the field, is it reasonable that they might have won 2 more? I think it begins and ends with him. I know they have a stable of decent running backs, and so week 3 or week 4 I'll have a much better gauge for you.
I agree, 100%.
And I think that the backup quarterback last year, he was pretty questionable.
Well, all their backup quarterbacks in the last 20 years.
You know what's interesting, guys? They have a kid who's a backup. His name is Oblad. He's from town here. He's a terrific drop-back passer, and he put up fantastic numbers in high school. The offense isn't really designed for a pro-set offense like he runs, but if he gets on the field, he throws a very nice ball. Him, I have seen.
Well, here's the bottom line. I'll say it as this way, and I talked to Coach Sanchez about this. We know that the season relies on Armani Rogers, right? And we know that he is a scrapper, but I think this is the difference. He needs to know when to fight for extra yardage and take a hit and when it is just not worth it and throw the ball away. We've seen too many times the last few years where he doesn't throw the ball away in a situation where it might be 3rd and 18 and he's just trying to get a couple yards, not even close to first down yardage, and he takes a hit. I talked to Coach about that, and Coach said that's a very good point. We've spoken about that. To me, that's what this season comes down to, the health of Armani Rogers. If he's healthy, if he doesn't take unnecessary hits, if he doesn't sustain a bad injury, and part of that is being unlucky too, we all know. But if he's smart and he throws it away when he needs to, I think UNLV is going to make a bowl game. I have them winning 6 games this year. Bernie, what do you have?
First of all, I want to address your point, then I'll answer your question. That's all part of a quarterback's ability to make decisions. It's a position that's played with your eyes. You receive the ball, you make mental snapshots, and you execute. And as I said earlier, his default mechanism is to run. And if you're going to run, don't be looking up linebackers in the secondary. Either avoid or get out of the way or get down or get out of bounds. I've actually got the Rebels 4-8, Brian. I think it's a daunting schedule. I will say this, though. If they come out of the 2 games, Brian, that and look, by the way, for what it's worth, in the last 18 years, there's only been 1 winning season here, so history's not on their side. But here's what bothers me. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the first 2 games. Arkansas State will come in here as a 3-point favorite. They're a very good team. They were 7-5 last year. They made a bowl game. They're projected to make a bowl game this year. Their coach, Brian Anderson, their head coach, Brian Anderson, suffered a tragedy.
Yeah, his wife.
His wife passed away, right. But I understand he's back on the sidelines. That game and the Reno game, to me, are the 2 most important games because if they win those 2 games, assuming they beat Southern Utah, I see a path to your 6 wins, Brian. Do I think they could win at Northwestern Wyoming? Maybe. Do I think they can win at Vanderbilt and Fresno State? No.
Make no mistake. Make no mistake. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just going to say, make no mistake about it. The Arkansas State game, in my opinion, is a must-win game for UNLV if they want to make a bowl game.
1,000% agree.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that one.
Because you can get beat by San Diego State. You can get beat by Boise. For some reason, they never seem to win at Colorado State. All of a sudden, Hawaii with Nick Rolovich, 18 starters back from an 8-win team. They took it to Arizona. You can win. You might lose 1 or 2 or 3 of those games and still have a path. Okay, because I expect them to beat San Jose State, and the Rebels might steal one that no one expects. Pat Fitzgerald's way down at Northwestern. Would it shock the world if they won? No, I'm not expecting it. No, but to your point, Brian, if they don't beat Arkansas State week 2, they start off 1-1, and their path to get to those 6 wins becomes very narrow.
Agree.
All right, so on a national level, Alabama's Dylan Moses was just reported out for the season. He was probably a top 10 pick, definitely a top 2 prospect for the NFL draft. Who are which I think is a big deal for that team. They're going to be great offensive, but they lost a lot defensively, as did Clemson. Who is your sleeper to win the national championship, and what games do you like this week, including today?
Well, I think Georgia could crash the party and win it, absolutely. They've not only got the best offensive line in all of college football, they've got an NFL type offensive line in Jake Fromm. And the last 2 times they played Alabama, if it had been a three-quarter game, Georgia would have won. Kirby Smart was part of the Nick Saban coaching tree. He's peeked behind the curtain. I think Georgia can break up the party. I don't see any way where Clemson and Alabama are not in the Final Four. I'm not buying Michigan. I covered that program, as you know, Brian, for many years. I think Harbaugh's a clown. We hear that Notre Dame, and he was hard to do three things: beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, and go to the college football championship. Doesn't come close. I mean, if you want to go on sleepovers and you want to climb trees and you want to go to Rome and you want to go to Paris and South Africa and field trips, he's your guy. You want to beat Ohio State?
That's
not
true.
so much. Now, the sleeper to get to your – I think, guys, keep an eye on Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley is a winner. They pick up Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was 26-2 as a starter at Alabama, completed 65% of his passes, and all of a sudden you get in the Lincoln Riley scheme where he's the true quarterback whisperer. We see what he did with Baker Mayfield. We see what he did with Kyler Murray, both Heisman Trophy winners, both first-round draft choices. That team is going to score a ton of points, and they got 8 people back on defense. They're a sleeper, I think, to win it all. So I believe you're going to see Alabama and Clemson for sure. Georgia probably sneaks in there, and if Oklahoma gets in, anything can happen. I will tell you this, the books are a little worried about LSU, Notre Dame, and Utah. If any of them win the national championship, they'll get killed. Back to Harbaugh, one of the narratives this year is that, well, we've got Michigan State at home, we've got Ohio State at home, we've got Notre Dame at home. This is our year. Well, what if I told you that at home against AP top 25 teams, Harbaugh is only 2-4 anyway, and he's 4-8 overall. But just because he has those teams at home means nothing to me. Wisconsin, they got to go to Wisconsin week 3. Wisconsin could pee on their parade right then and there, as Northwestern almost did in week 3 last year. As far as this weekend, I like Oregon plus the 3.5 points against Auburn.
Thanks for that fantastic analysis. I like LSU as my sleeper this year. I agree with you on Georgia.
Oh, man, they're good.
LSU there's so much talent defensively. Burrow is a game manager. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. They have 2 5-star wide receivers that are playing as well. You mentioned Oklahoma. Oklahoma had a great offensive line for Kyler Murray. They do not anymore. I don't like Jalen Hurts as a passer. I do agree that they're going to be much better defensively than people think. They bring back a lot, like Neville Gallimore, for example, is a fantastic defensive player. This weekend, I'm a big fan of South Florida against Wisconsin. I think that Arizona State just blows the brakes off of Kent State tonight. I like the under in the Oregon-Auburn game, and then I kind of like the under in the A&M Texas State game. And I'm starting to think that Florida Atlantic gives Ohio State a run for their money with the 28.
Yeah, week 1, anything you just said there is in play, and you're not wrong about Jalen Hurts. He's not a pure prototypical pocket drop-back passer, but they'll design a lot of short routes from him, 3-step drops, max protects, 2-receiver routes, just to get the ball there. And he'll be able to keep plays alive with his feet. He does keep his eyes downfield nicely. Remember, he came off the bench and saved Tua's butt last year. So the kid has that winning gene, 26-2 as a starter.
Right.
I love your LSU play. 8 starters back on defense, 8 on offense. They're absolutely loaded. They are absolutely scary. And their schedule favors them. And, they wouldn't face Alabama until November 9th, whenever that is. They can catch Bama. They're athletic enough. And it's funny, I really root for a guy named Ed Orgeron. You can't understand what the hell he's saying, but I think he's a damn good coach.
It's like watching the Water Boy.
LSU. Right. Maybe he should recruit Bobby Boucher. And really available. The bottom line is, though, I root for people like that, and I know you do too, Brian.
Yep.
He got passed over to LSU. He got passed over to USC. They made fun of him.
Sure.
He paid his dues. He put his hip down. He kept grinding. He is a masterful recruiter.
Amazing recruiter.
And now that he's got his guys there at LSU, that is an incredibly athletic team, and they are on the short list.
Yeah, we are all in agreement in studio on that one. So, Bernie, before we let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to plug your nationally syndicated show. You do a fantastic job. It is very Vegas-friendly. You guys obviously go over all the games, in-depth analysis. Tell us a little bit about it.
The show is entitled Straight Out of Vegas. It airs on Fox Sports Radio, National, and SiriusXM Channel 83. We're syndicated on about 360 stations nationwide. And what we try to do is bring them to Vegas truth in the sense of analyzing games from the perspective of the bettor who's looking for the edge. This is an information business. But we don't want to just be cornball, hard, this line, that line. We try to give perspective. We try to, I had a long oratory about Andrew Luck last week because I was in Detroit when Barry Sanders retired, and I know these decisions aren't always made, on an island. There are family members involved. I don't want to get off track here, but what we try to do is create the most eclectic content we can, so that even if people don't like sports betting, they'll like to listen for the information or to enjoy the games better. And I'm fortunate, and Brian, it was always great to be on with you when I was hosting Rebel Extra. And I'm fortunate I've been behind the mic former fashion since 1994. I covered Michigan sports for years and did the Detroit Lions pre- and post-game show, 98 to 2008 on CBS radio. So hopefully I didn't get too long-winded.
No, that's okay. You deserve it. You've been doing this for a very long time, and you do a fantastic job, and we're always happy to have you on, and we hope we could have you on again very soon. Bernie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and hopefully we can catch up with you again next week, okay?
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I wasn't more well-versed on the UNLV roster, but I'm pretty sure Randall Cunningham's gone.
Listen, there's not many people that are extremely well-versed on
Lexington Thomas is the new kicker.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
As long as the punter is still there, I'm happy. That punter had a cannon for a leg.
Definitely. Bernie, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Best to you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Bernie.
There you go. That's Bernie Fratto, broadcasting legend. I think that's fair to say. He's been doing this thing a long time, man, from Detroit. We'll take a quick break. Be back right after this. You're listening to the Vegas Take on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDON.